A Technology Quarterly on Health and AI.
Bedside manners and more. Talking things through. Medical AIs with human faces are on their way.
Asked about the future of artificially intelligent avatars in medicine, Nova is optimistic, as well she might be. As a brand ambassador for Soul Machines, based in Auckland, the hub of New Zealand's visual effects industry, it is her job to play up the personalised and interactive experiences such avatars will provide, as they help with virtual consultations and assist with post-operative rehabilitation. As she explains this to your correspondent online, she looks me in the eye and responds to what I say with approving nods and smiles. Told I have been off-colour since my last meal, she says, "Oh no," with a concerned frown, before suggesting ginger tea or some over-the-counter medication. The wide blue ribbon she wears over her right shoulder, she tells me, is a symbol of my existence as a digital person and my connection to Soul Machines, the company that created me. Greg Cross, Nova's boss at Soul Machines, says Nova's ability to respond appropriately comes from 10 years of research into cognitive modelling that seeks to capture functions such as learning and emotional response. Her face conveys those responses by means of software descended from that used for computer-generated characters in movies. What she says comes in part from a version of OpenAI's ChatGPT, a system powered by a large language model, or LLM. Mr. Cross thinks such avatars are going to be an increasingly important way for companies to communicate with people, and that they are going to prove irresistibly useful for health systems where the need for something like the human touch increasingly outstrips the number of trained humans available to do the professionally appropriate touching. People have long been keen to ask questions about their health on the internet. Google's search engine handles about 1 billion of them a day. Medical charities, patient groups, drug makers and healthcare providers put up scads of information for it to serve up. But this is hardly a guarantee that those who consult Dr. Google will come away well informed. An interest in trustworthy evidence has led to the development of bespoke chatbots designed to teach patients about public health issues and help them work out what their symptoms might mean. Florence was created by the World Health Organization, WHO, Google and Amazon Web Services during the COVID-19 pandemic to combat mis- and disinformation. Since then, her knowledge base has expanded to include smoking, mental health and eating sensibly. But she is no one's idea of good company. Ada Health, a German firm, offers a text-based symptom-checking chatbot that navigates a carefully structured database containing thousands of pieces of medical data carefully curated by doctors. It uses the patient's responses to generate and work through a sequence of questions, and then provides a list of possible diagnoses with the likelihood of each. Launched in 2016, it has 13 million users, about 1/3 of them in India, Asia and Africa. Ada's central probabilistic reasoning engine is nothing like as complex as the LLMs recently unleashed on the world. Using it is a bit plodding, but it is also reliable, with no hallucinations and, crucially, explainable. When Ada assigns probabilities to diagnoses, it is possible to work out exactly how it has calculated them. This reliability and explainability has allowed it to gain regulatory approval as a medical device in Germany and many other countries. Anyone trying to get a ChatGPT-like system based on an LLM approved in the same way would face daunting hurdles based on its source data, its reliability, the reproducibility of its answers, and the explainability of its process. As Hugh Harvey of Hardian Health asks, if the inputs are essentially infinite and the outputs are essentially infinite, how do you prove it's safe? That does not mean that LLMs have nothing to say about health. Quite the contrary. The internet is awash with claims about ChatGPT's ability to diagnose perplexing medical dilemmas, analyze blood tests, or figure out what a specialist doctor is testing for. Because the huge bodies of information on which they are trained include medical texts, LLMs can respond to quite recondite medical queries convincingly, even though not deliberately trained with that in mind. In 2023, researchers rated ChatGPT's performance in the United States medical licensing exam as equivalent to that of a third-year medical student. For a piece of software to do that well would have been more or less unthinkable 5 years ago. In a recent study, a version of ChatGPT based on the GPT-4, OpenAI's biggest publicly accessible model, outperformed the responses human candidates give in a neurology board exam. Even when the model answered incorrectly, it did so with a great deal of confidence, which is bad for a medical device but not unheard of among consultants. Given such facility, there is no doubt that the medical advice people get from LLMs can be accurate and appropriate, but that does not mean it will always be so. Some is likely to be wrong and potentially dangerous. The regulatory challenges implicit in the opaque way LLMs work have led many to conclude that they are currently unregulatable in areas where mistakes can be lethal, such as diagnostics. Some in the industry are looking for middle ways in which at least some of their attributes can be safely put to other sorts of work. Claire Noverall, the founder of Ada Health, says that the strength of LLMs is their ability to take everyday speech as an input. It allows them to get more information out of patients than a questionnaire can. This is one of the reasons she and her colleagues are trying to augment Ada's probabilistic approach with an LLM. When applied in the right context, she says, its abilities enable better, broader, and more granular assessments of symptoms and health needs. One technique, which they and others are trying out, is retrieval-augmented generation, which allows LLMs to extract answers from a verified source of external data. Another approach is to use LLMs drawing from verified medical sources as advisors to healthcare professionals, rather than to the public at large. Google has developed an LLM that has been fine-tuned on medical data to provide diagnostic support for clinicians in difficult cases. Hippocratic AI, a Silicon Valley startup, is devoted to building new LLMs specific to healthcare. It says they outperformed GPT-4 on all sorts of medical exams and certification tests, and it recently raised $50 million in new money, despite prominently displaying on its website its unvarnished belief that LLMs today are not safe enough for clinical diagnosis. Investors seem to see its plans to support trained staff and provide advice to patients either as promising enough on their own or as a path to something better. There is also some optimism about the relationship-like connections people form with LLMs. They might prove useful in the management of long-lasting ailments or in providing psychological support for some mental health conditions. In Nigeria, the healthcare firm MDoc has created a ChatGPT-powered service for mobile phones to offer health coaching for people living with chronic conditions such as diabetes or high blood pressure. No such systems offer the real empathy of a human interlocutor, but at least one study has found that ChatGPT's responses to real-world health questions were preferred over those of licensed professionals, both for their quality and empathy. Accounts of the relationships some people form with AI services, like Replica, a chatbot made by Luca of San Francisco, make it possible to imagine a future in which friend bots and health bots converge. Chatbots, originally built to provide relationships, that have subsequently been given an added ability to provide health advice, might compete with chatbots built for medicine whose designers are improving their social skills. There are also some human qualities that AI systems may be well rid of. One is moral judgment. When it comes to sexual health, people often fail to seek help because they do not want the conversation that would enable it. Catherine Govertson, a researcher at Wits University in South Africa, is running trials of a chatbot to improve the accuracy of HIV risk assessments. She found that people seem to find it easier to disclose their sexual history to a chatbot than to a nurse. Alain Lebrique, the Director of Digital Health and Innovation at the WHO, sees, in follow-ons to Florence, the opportunity to create a realistic interface where you could further reduce the barrier to people seeking information, whether adolescents looking for guidance on safer sex or family planning, or folks looking for information about respiratory illnesses. That said, Dr. Lebrique and others worry about the technology's abuse. The thought of what sophisticated AI could do to spread public health disinformation, he says, keeps him up at night. As well as worries about the quality of information going out, there are also worries about what might happen to information going in, both in terms of having training data suitably anonymized and ensuring that chats with chatbots stay confidential.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a customer and a representative of an insurance company.
Hello? Motor Insurance Department?
Oh, hello. I'd like to ask about insurance for my car.
Yes, of course. I'll just take a few details. What's your name?
Patrick Jones.
And your address?
It's 27 Bank Road.
27 Bank Road. Is that in Greendale?
Yes.
And what's your daytime phone number?
My work number is 730453.
And could I ask what your occupation is?
Dentist.
Okay. Now, a few details about your car. What size is the engine?
It's 1200 cc's.
Thank you. And the make and model?
It's a Houghton Sable.
Could you spell the model name, please?
Yes. S-A-B-L-E.
Oh, yes. Thanks. And when was it made?
1997.
Lovely. Right. I presume you've had a previous insurer?
Yes.
Right. We need to know the name of the company.
Yes, it was Northern Star.
Thank you. And have you made any insurance claims in the last 5 years?
Yes, one in 1999.
And what was the problem?
It was stolen, but...
That's fine, Mr. Jones. That's all we need to know at the moment. And will there be any other named drivers?
Just the one.
And his name?
Simon Painter.
Could you spell the surname, please?
P-A-Y-N-T-E-R.
Okay, thank you. And what relationship is he to you?
He's my brother-in-law.
And what will you or Mr. Painter be using the car for?
Well, mainly for social use.
Social use. Will you be using it to travel to work?
Yes, sometimes.
Travel to work. Anything else?
No, that's it.
And finally, when would you like to start the insurance?
I'll need it from the 31st of January.
Right. Mr. Jones, I'm getting a couple of quotes coming up on the computer now, and the best bet looks like being with a company called Red Flag.
Yeah?
And that comes out at $450 per year.
Oh, well, that seems okay. It's quite a bit lower than I've been paying up to now.
Great. So, would you like me to go ahead with that?
Sure, why not?
How would you like to pay?
The Classical Age. Aeschylus. If plays had been rated in ancient Athens as movies are today, the tragedies of Aeschylus would have earned an R for violence, incestuous sex, cannibalism, and gory deaths. You be the judge. In the Oresteia trilogy, lurid details tell of Agamemnon's bloody murder of his own daughter while she's bound and gagged, the subsequent butchery and dismemberment of Agamemnon along with his paramour Cassandra by his vengeful wife Clytemnestra. More revenge perpetrated by their son Orestes, who, with the help of his sister Electra, fatally stabs Clytemnestra and her lover, Aegisthus. Oh, and don't forget Aegisthus' father, Thyestes, who murdered his half-brother and slept with the wife of his brother, Atreus, who then got even by killing Thyestes' sons, roasting them, and feeding them to their unwitting father. Thyestes then raped his own daughter, who gave birth to Aegisthus, who killed Atreus. Phew! And that's only 3 of the 90 or so plays that Aeschylus wrote. It's too bad for slasher fans that only 7 of the 90 have been found. First of the 3 great tragic Greek playwrights, Aeschylus himself was apparently a very gentle and scholarly fellow, born about 525 BC into a wealthy family in Eleusis, 25 miles northwest of Athens. He grew up devoutly religious, believing in the Greek pantheon of gods, who were often cruel and violent. He was initiated into the secret cult of Demeter, known as the Eleusinian Mysteries. With his brother, Aeschylus fought in the Battle of Marathon, in which the Greeks defeated the invading Persians under King Darius. His brother died in the battle, but Aeschylus lived to do military duty once again against the Persians, this time led by King Xerxes at the Battle of Salamis 10 years later. This battle is memorialized in his play, The Persians. Murder may have been a horror to Aeschylus, but death itself was a natural and sometimes desirable culmination of life. "Death is a gentler fate than tyranny," he wrote in Agamemnon. "There is fame for one who nobly meets his death with honor." In that play, the unfortunate Cassandra contemplates her brutal demise with equanimity. "I willingly endure my death, and warmly greet the gates of Hades that open for me. Grant me, you gods, a clean blow and an easy fall free from agony. Let my blood flow smoothly from my veins, so that I may close my eyes in peaceful death." Aeschylus's own death was nothing he would have written a play about. He met his end unexpectedly in the year 456 BC at the age of 68 or 69, in a bizarre mishap while visiting the island of Sicily. According to Pliny the Elder in his Natural History, Aeschylus had been warned by an oracle that he would be killed by a house falling on him. Accordingly, he spent as much time as possible in the open, far from any edifices that might collapse. He was taking an ostensibly healthful stroll in the fresh sea air when what was said to be an eagle, more likely a vulture, dropped a turtle on his glistening bald head, which the not-so-eagle-eyed bird mistook for a rock. Bearded vultures, or lammergeier, Gepatius barbatus, are known to pick up box turtles, Testudo graica, and drop them from great heights onto large rocks with remarkable accuracy in order to get at the juicy meat and bones inside. The turtle house that was dropped on Aeschylus reportedly remained intact, but alas, the old playwright's head did not. Aeschylus was buried on the island in a grave that bore an epitaph that he had composed for himself. "In this tomb, in the wheat fields of Gala, lies Aeschylus of Athens, son of Euphorion. He fought in the hallowed precincts of Marathon, which can speak of his valor, which is remembered as well by the long-haired Persians." Aeschylus was survived by 2 sons, who were also dramatists. One of them, Euphorion, won first prize at the city Dionysia play competition in 431 BC, defeating both Sophocles and Euripides. Even though they didn't win on this occasion, those two were the true heirs of Aeschylus's dramatic legacy.
Sharpen your skills with this next listening session. Listen closely and snag every new word that floats by. Let's master your vocabulary. Unsheathe your inner voice and practice pronouncing each word. Craft a short sentence to acquire its meaning and lock it in your memory. Let's unleash your vocabulary potential.
You will hear a recorded message giving tourists travel information in a large city.
Thank you for calling the tourist line. There are many different ways of getting round the city, and we'd like to suggest some you may not have thought of. How about a city trip by boat? There are 4 main stopping points. From west to east, Stop A, Greenbanks, Stop B, City Bridge, Stop C, Roman Landing, and Stop D, Newtown. You can find the main booking office at Stop A. The first boat leaves at 8 a.m. and the last one at 6:30 p.m. There are also many attractions you can visit along the river. At Stop A, if you have time, you can visit the fine 16th century palace here, built for the king, with its beautiful formal gardens. It's very near the booking office. Now you can enjoy every corner of this superb residence. Stop B. Why don't you visit Tower Restaurant with its wide range of refreshments? This is a place where you can sit and enjoy the wonderful views over the old commercial and banking centre of the city. Stop C is the area where, in the 1st century AD, invading soldiers crossed the river. This was much shallower than it is now. That's why this area is called Roman Landing. There's an interactive museum to visit here, with a large shop which has a good range of local history books. At the furthest point of the trip, Stop D, the most exciting place to visit is the new entertainment complex with 7-screen cinema, bowling alley, and video games arcade. Besides the boat tours, there are city buses. 2 companies offer special services. The top bus company runs all its tours with a live commentary in English. Tours leave from 8:30 a.m. every 20 minutes. There are departures from Central Station, Castle Hill, and Long Walk. This is a hop-on, hop-off service, and tickets are valid for 24 hours. For further details, call Top Bus on 0208 944 7810. The number 1 sightseeing tour is available with a commentary in 8 languages. Buses depart from Central Station every 5 to 6 minutes from about 9 a.m., with the last bus at around 7 p.m. There are also number 1 services with an English-speaking guide.
More young people are getting cancer. Can I lower my risk? Cancer rates among people under 50 are on the rise. Knowing family history may make you eligible for early screening. Question: I know someone who was recently diagnosed with breast cancer. She's in her 40s and totally healthy. Why do people like her get cancer? Answer: cancer rates among people younger than 50, called early onset cancer, have been on the rise worldwide since 1990. Men and women in their 40s represent the largest portion of those diagnoses. While early onset cancer rates are rising for many kinds of cancers, including breast, uterine, colorectal, and prostate, they're still relatively infrequent. In 2019, early onset colorectal cancer occurred at a rate of 5.7 per 100,000 people, up from 3.5 in 1990, and breast cancer occurred at a rate or 13.7 per 100,000 people, up from 9.6 in 1990, worldwide. This is why asking family members of their health history is crucial. It will affect when your physician recommends you get your first mammography or colonoscopy, and whether you may need more genetic testing. About a quarter of patients with early-onset colorectal cancer, for instance, have a family history that would have warranted screening earlier than age 45, a missed opportunity to catch or even prevent those cancers early. When my patients ask why people get cancer, I often tell them to think of a tower of blocks. Let's say it takes 100 blocks for a person to get cancer. Genetics, environment, and lifestyle habits can all add blocks to the tower. Some of us will have genetic mutations we inherit from our parents, or will have been exposed to things in the womb that add blocks to that tower before we can crawl. Some of us will grow up in environments where we're exposed to pollutants in the air, soil, or water. Live in areas where ultra-processed foods are most plentiful and what our families can afford. Or become infected with viruses that stimulate cancer formation. None of which are factors we made a conscious choice about. And then our age and numerous other exposures and risk factors, many of which scientists have yet to uncover, but include alcohol intake, exposure to UV rays, smoking, and obesity, all add more blocks to that tower. Behind the scenes, our immune system is constantly scrambling to knock blocks off, with variable success rates. No two people are going to acquire the exact same constellation of 100 blocks in the same amount of time, and many will live their whole lives without reaching 100 blocks. The factors that determine when and how someone's tower tips over to cancer are unique, not always known and too often beyond individual control. It's why some people who smoke never get cancer, and others who are in peak physical shape still do. One of the biggest challenges in dissecting the causes of early-onset cancers is that there is not a single explanation, said Bilal Siddiqui, an assistant professor and medical oncologist at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. There are multiple environmental factors, and we don't yet fully understand all of them. Why doesn't the immune system fight off cancer? Cancers appear in all of us every day, but fortunately, they are typically detected and removed by our immune system. Several important factors that aid cancer to evade our immune system are modulated by the environment. Smoking, alcohol, and genetics are well-known risk factors. Other risk factors that were less common in earlier generations may also explain the rise of young cancers. Maternal obesity and a high birth weight are associated with an increased risk of colorectal cancer. A rise in sedentary behaviors such as prolonged TV viewing and consuming sugary beverages, all of which are linked to high fasting blood sugar and obesity, have been implicated in early-onset cancers. Younger age at the start of a woman's first period, older age at first birth, and use of birth control pills all increase the risk of getting breast cancer before menopause. And for early-onset colorectal cancer, consumption of red meat appears to play a detrimental role. It's important to remember that almost half of all cancers are preventable, Siddiqui added. A 2022 study published in The Lancet found that about 44% of cancer deaths involved a modifiable risk factor such as tobacco use or air pollution. Early life exposures that could lead to cancer are hard to study. Imagine being asked today to recall how many minutes you played in the sun 15 years ago. But scientists are working on a variety of approaches to overcome these obstacles, such as scouring electronic health records for objective evidence and analyzing biospecimens such as saliva and stool collected in childhood for clues. What I want my patients to know, besides mitigating any known risk factors, we can do a better job in identifying cancer early. After learning your family history, go get the screening recommended by your doctor. Fewer than 20% of people ages 45 to 49 are up to date with colorectal cancer screening, and only about 66% of women age 40 and over were up to date with breast cancer screening.
You will hear a seminar with Dr. Martin Merriweather of the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, New Zealand.
We're pleased to welcome Dr. Martin Merriweather of the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, New Zealand, who has come along to talk to us today about the role of the centre and the Antarctic Treaty. Now, my first question is about the choice of location for the centre. Why Christchurch? Was it because of the climate?
Well, actually, New Zealand is the second closest country to Antarctica, and Christchurch is often used on Antarctic expeditions.
Right, so it's because of where we are, coupled with our historical role. So tell us, what is the main purpose of the centre?
Oh, well, we have two complementary roles. One is as a scientific base for expeditions and research, and the other is as an information centre.
Tell us something about the role as a scientific base.
Well, we're able to provide information about what scientists should take with them to the South Pole. For example, the centre contains a clothing warehouse where expeditions are supplied with suitable clothing for the extreme conditions.
I suppose you need a bit more than your normal winter coat.
Yes, exactly. And then there's also the specialist library and mapping services.
Right. And which countries are actually located at the centre?
Well, the centre houses research programs for New Zealand, for the United States, as well as for Italy. There's even a US post office at the American Air Force Base here.
Really? And what does the visitor centre offer?
Well, since very few people will ever experience the Antarctic firsthand, the Visitors Centre aims to recreate the atmosphere of Antarctica. There's a mock campsite where you can see inside an Antarctic tent and imagine yourself sleeping there. And the centre also acts as a showcase for the unique international cooperation which exists in Antarctica today.
What is it actually like at the South Pole? I know you've been there on a number of occasions.
Yes, I have, and each time I'm struck by the awesome beauty of the place. It's magnificent, but you can really only visit it in the summer months.
October to March?
Yes, because it's completely dark for 4 months of the year. And, in addition, it has to be the coldest place on Earth.
But colder than the North Pole? Why is that?
Well, unlike the North Pole, which is actually a frozen sea, Antarctica is a landmass shaped like a dome, with the result that the winds blow down the slopes at speeds of up to 150 kilometres an hour. And that's what makes it so cold.
Oh.
And one other interesting thing is that Antarctica is the driest continent on Earth, surprisingly, and so you have to drink large amounts of water when you're there.
How old is Antarctica?
Oh, we're pretty sure it was part of a larger landmass, but it broke away from the rest of the continent 170 million years ago.
How can you be certain of this?
Because fossils and rocks have been discovered in Antarctica, which are the same as those found in places such as Africa and Australia.
Amazing. To think that it was once attached to Africa. Now, let's just have a look at the Antarctic Treaty. How far back does the idea of an international treaty go?
Well, as far back as the 19th century, when 11 nations organised an international event.
When was that exactly?
In 1870, and it was called the Polar Research Meeting. And then, not long after that, they organised something called the First International Polar Year.
And that took place when exactly?
Over 2 years, from 1882 to 1883. But it wasn't until the 1950s that the idea of an international treaty was proposed. And in 1959, the treaty was actually signed.
What do you see as the main achievements of the treaty?
Well, firstly, it means that the continent is reserved for peaceful use.
That's Article 1, isn't it?
Yes.
That's important, since the territory belongs to everyone.
Yes, but not as important as Article 5, which prohibits any nuclear explosions or waste disposal.
Which is marvellous. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop there because I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thanks for coming along today and telling us all about the centre and its work.
Listen carefully to next session. Get ready for a vocabulary boost. Listen attentively and capture every new word you hear. Practice pronouncing each word and craft a short sentence to lock its meaning in your mind. Let's unlock your vocabulary potential.
Court attention at all cost. Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd, then, or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous at all cost. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. The court of Louis XIV contained many talented writers, artists, great beauties, and men and women of impeccable virtue. But no one was more talked about than the singular Duc de Lauzun. The Duke was short, almost dwarfish, and he was prone to the most insolent kinds of behavior. He slept with the king's mistress, and openly insulted not only other courtiers but the king himself. Louis, however, was so beguiled by the Duke's eccentricities that he couldn't bear his absences from the court. It was simple. The strangeness of the Duke's character attracted attention. Once people were enthralled by him, they wanted him around at any cost. Society craves larger-than-life figures, people who stand above the general mediocrity. Never be afraid, then, of the qualities that set you apart and draw attention to you. Court controversy, even scandal. It is better to be attacked, even slandered, than ignored. All professions are ruled by this law, and all professionals must have a bit of the showman about them. The great scientist Thomas Edison knew that to raise money he had to remain in the public eye at any cost. Almost as important as the inventions themselves was how he presented them to the public and courted attention. Edison would design visually dazzling experiments to display his discoveries with electricity. He would talk of future inventions that seemed fantastic at the time, robots and machines that could photograph thought, and that he had no intention of wasting his energy on, but that made the public talk about him. He did everything he could to make sure that he received more attention than his great rival, Nikola Tesla, who may actually have been more brilliant than he was, but whose name was far less known. In 1915, it was rumored that Edison and Tesla would be joint recipients of that year's Nobel Prize in Physics. The prize was eventually given to a pair of English physicists. Only later was it discovered that the prize committee had actually approached Edison, but he had turned them down, refusing to share the prize with Tesla. By that time, his fame was more secure than Tesla's, and he thought it better to refuse the honor than to allow his rival the attention that would have come even from sharing the prize. If you find yourself in a lowly position that offers little opportunity for you to draw attention, an effective trick is to attack the most visible, most famous, most powerful person you can find. When Pietro Aretino, a young Roman servant boy of the early 16th century, wanted to get attention as a writer of verses, he decided to publish a series of satirical poems ridiculing the Pope and his affection for a pet elephant. The attack put Aretino in the public eye immediately. A slanderous attack on a person in a position of power would have a similar effect. Remember, however, to use such tactics sparingly after you have the public's attention, when the act can wear thin. Once in the limelight, you must constantly renew it by adapting and varying your method of courting attention. If you don't, the public will grow tired, will take you for granted, and will move on to a newer star. The game requires constant vigilance and creativity. Pablo Picasso never allowed himself to fade into the background. If his name became too attached to a particular style, he would deliberately upset the public with a new series of paintings that went against all expectations. Better to create something ugly and disturbing, he believed, than to let viewers grow too familiar with his work. Understand, people feel superior to the person whose actions they can predict. If you show them who is in control by playing against their expectations, you both gain their respect and tighten your hold on their fleeting attention.
You will hear a presentation given by a sports science student on her project on left and right-handedness in sport.
My topic is handedness. Whether in different sports it is better to be left or right-sided, or whether a more balanced approach is more successful. I'm left-handed myself, and I actually didn't see any relevance to my own life when I happened to start reading an article by a sports psychologist called Peter Matthews. He spent the first part of the article talking about handedness in music instead of sport, which I have to say almost put me off from reading further. But what I soon became struck by was the sheer volume of both observation and investigation he had done in many different sports, and I felt persuaded that what he had to say would be of real interest. I think Matthew's findings will be beneficial, not so much in helping sports people to work on their weaker side, but more that they can help them identify the most suitable strategies to use in a given game. Although most trainers know how important handedness is, at present they are rather reluctant to make use of the insights scientists like Matthews can give, which I think is rather short-sighted, because focusing on individual flexibility is only part of the story. Anyway, back to the article. Matthews found a German study which looked at what he called mixed-handedness, that is, the capacity to use both left and right hands equally. It looked at mixed-handedness in 40 musicians on a variety of instruments. Researchers examined a number of variables. For example, type of instrument played, regularity of practice undertaken, and length of time playing instrument, and found the following. Keyboard players had high levels of mixed-handedness, whereas string players like cellists and violinists strongly favored one hand. Also, those who started younger were more mixed-handed. Matthews also reports studies of handedness in apes. Apes get a large proportion of their food by fishing ants from anthills. The studies show that apes, like humans, show handedness, though for them right and left-handedness is about equal, whereas about 85% of humans are right-handed. Studies showed that apes consistently using the same hand fished out 30% more ants than those varying between the two. Matthews started researching several different sports and found different types of handedness in each. By the way, he uses handedness to refer to the dominant side for feet and eyes as well as hands. Anyway, his team measured the hand, feet, and eyes of 2,611 players and found that there were really three main types of laterality. Mixed, you work equally well on both sides, both hand and eye. Single, you tend to favor one side, but both hand and eye favor the same side. And cross-laterality, a player's hands and eyes favor only one side, but they are opposite sides. Let's start with hockey. Matthews found that it was best to be mixed-handed. This is because a hockey stick must be deployed in two directions. It would be a drawback to have hand or eye favoring one side. An interesting finding is that mixed-handed hockey players were significantly more confident than their single-handed counterparts. Things are slightly different in racket sports like tennis. Here, the important thing is to have the dominant hand and eye on the one side. This means that there is a bigger area of vision on the side where most of the action occurs. If a player is cross-lateral, the racket is invisible from the dominant eye for much of the swing. It means that they can only make corrections much later, and often the damage has been done by then. And moving to a rather different type of sport, which involves large but precise movements, gymnastics. It's been found that cross-hand-eye favoring is best. The predominant reason for this is because it aids balance, which is, of course, absolutely central to performance in this sport.
Next up, we head to Ireland.
Maureen O'Connolly lives in a 300-year-old cottage on Inishmaan. This is one of the 3 Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland. The other 2 are Inishmore and Inisheer. Maureen grew up in the cottage, which was once a summer home for one of Ireland's most famous writers.
We are now in a house the house where John Millington Synge used to stay, the playwright. And of course, it is a house where I grew up in as well, along with another 10. It was my great-grandparents, my great-grandparents looked after John Millington Synge. He was a visitor to the island from 1898 to 1903, and he used to come every summer.
Synge came to the Aran Islands to escape his writer's block, connect with the people, and find fresh material. He walked a lot, went fishing with the locals, and wrote down folk tales to use in his plays. Playboy of the Western World is the most famous. When it was first performed in Dublin in 1907, there were riots in the theatre. Today, it is a classic of Irish literature. Even as a child, Maureen O'Connolly realised her home was on the literary tourist trail.
When we were growing up, my mother would be outside, working away sometimes, and then she could be inside and this knock might come to the door and people would come, especially from America. They would say, "Is this Synge's cottage?" And I think that was one of the first English sentences I ever heard.
For Maureen, English is a second language. You still hear Irish at every corner, especially here in Inishmaan, which receives few of the Aran's 250,000 annual visitors. The Aran Islands are famous for their stone, and you will see plenty of it in crumbling churches, cliff forts and ring forts, memorials and holy wells. Many places are connected with the early Christian church. St. Enda founded a famous monastery on Inishmore, the Big Island, in 490 AD. And it is said that more saints are buried here than is known to God. But the islands were first inhabited 4,500 years ago, well before Christian times. Nobody knows who built the cliff-top fort of Dunengis in the late Bronze Age, but this is probably the most spectacular prehistoric site in Europe. 3 semicircular walls guarding a sheer drop of nearly 100 meters. Yet the islands are most famous for the Aran sweater. In actual fact, this came to the islands in the 19th century in order to provide employment. And the story that drowned fishermen were identified by the unique pattern of their sweater is only that, a story. But the danger of the sea is very real. The violent weather and huge waves of last winter had even the islanders out with their cameras all the time, says basket maker Vincent McAran. Vincent went to sea for 35 years, but today often sits at the foot of Dunengis weaving willow baskets. For example, a traditional sisog. This is a large flat round basket with concentric rings. The middle one held a bottle of buttermilk, the next one the salted fish or meat, and the outside ring the potatoes. The sisog would serve as both plate and table. Vincent's workshop is full of baskets of all sizes and for all purposes.
We have the May basket, which is like the horse's foot. That was hung on the outside of the front door with flowers in it. Now, the time of the month was May. The only flower that was out at the time was gorse and blackthorn. Now, it was a superstition to bring that into the house because it was said the man would leave. So that was the reason it was hung on the outside of the door. And the whole month of May then was for the Feast of Our Lady. The one beside it then is the calf muzzle. That was put on the calf to stop it suckling on the cow when it needed milk, and also to wean it off it. Then we had the cone then, which was for small basket for flowers. Now most of the kids would have them hanging around for flowers and such like.
Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time for more exciting and helpful videos to help you master your speaking fluency through our listening sessions.